RWBY Volume 6 is actually quite good. Mostly. I'm going to try and go as easy on Volume 6 as I can because in its defense, it did have the near impossible task of course correcting this ship after the cataclysmic nosedive that was Volume 5. The bar was set so low that almost anything short of another volume sitting around in a house would have been seen as an improvement. And Volume 6 was an improvement, only a damn fool would not acknowledge that. In fact, I don't believe it is an exaggeration to say that Volume 6 may very well be the best volume of the show, both in terms of moving things forward and even improving character standing. It's the first volume in maybe ever where Ruby Rose becomes a proactive protagonist in the center stage of her own show, and Team RWBY finally feels like the main focal point of the show instead of a bunch of side characters that don't really feel important or matter in any way, and who are really only there because we need to live up to the show's name somehow. For the first time in a very, very long time, it felt like I was watching, well, RWBY. As it always should have been. No wasting over half the volume brooding with Jaune, just a little bit of the volume. No having the stupid farm boy being the main character. In fact, I feel like the volume kind of gave up on Oscar as a character. The girls were front and center, and what they did mattered. Well, as much as anything in RWBY can matter, really.
That all being said, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. You and I, dear viewer, we've come a long way together, and if there's one thing you should know about me, is that if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you I don't like it, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I don't like it. I'm not going to tell you I like something if I don't, I'm not going to tell you that I hate something if I love it. You know, some things can be, fully good, and some things be fully bad, and some have a little mix of both, but at the end of the day, I'm going to give you the straight dope. So, let's clear that out of the way right now before we go any further, just so you understand.
And while Volume 6 did improve things in many ways, it is still very, very flawed. I mean, the volume starts off with its usual foolishness. We have RWBY zipping around with her totally not speed semblance, because really, who cares what her semblance really is anymore? Sun and Ilya depart the show in this episode, which is both good and bad. On the good, it gets Mela Lee out of this godforsaken show, and Sun, you didn't need him. I've been saying that since Volume 4, so good to cut him out now. But the group's going to Atlas, which is the least fondest friendly place on Remnant, and this would have been a really cool opportunity to show the different reactions and feelings of the individual fondness to the racism of the human race. Oh. Right, RWBY. They didn't even realize they ended the White Fang storyline in the worst possible way last volume. Right, never mind. Also, Neptune is back for a minute. If anybody still cares. They kind of blew their opportunity last volume. I guess they figured this would make up for it. But we must sing hallelujah and throw confetti in praise because someone in this group of dunderheads finally realized that taking the train straight to their objective is better than meandering around the countryside for multiple months on end. In fact, the way they handled the traveling parts of this volume is not unlike the rewrite suggestions I made towards the end of my Volume 4 series.
They try to take the train from the docks, but the guy shows up and breaks the rails, forcing them to go on foot.
Someone on that team was listening. I don't care what anyone says. Someone on that team was listening. And then, as if the characters finally growing brain cells to replenish the ones they lost with that arm wasn't good enough, we get a Grim fight. A really, really good Grim fight. Dare I even say, the best Grim fight in the entire series. And I know that people will point to the explosive rush that was the Volume 3 finale, but when I think of the Volume 3 finale, I think less about grim fights and more of the interpersonal conflicts and society and everything else in their lives falling down around their heads, and arms getting sliced off, and Miles and Carrie taking on the mantle of Furious of Remnant and enacting some warped final solution over its Irish population. This is just a straight-up monster brawl, just drag out, knock out, duking it out. But it's not just the cinematography or the fight choreography, even though it is better than a lot of other fights we've gotten recently. It's not even the threat of the grim, even though this is the most threatening they've been since the fall of Pekin. No, I enjoy this episode so much because for the first time since the creator and lead animator OD'd on cat allergy medication, it feels like someone involved with the animation of this show finally gives a shit again. And that's worth all the possible animation mistakes in the world, because at least they care again. There are not many fights this volume that I consider truly bad. And it's mostly because the fights flow with the same passion and energy that the ones in the first two volumes have. I can forgive a lot as long as the passion is there and everyone's enjoying their work. I give points for effort despite what people say. It's why I always thought the 98 Godzilla was the best one, aside from being corny and cheesy and overall stupid, because I felt like everyone involved was at least trying to do something good with what they were given. And it's why I give that new Roswell reboot a pass, because it feels like the cast is genuinely having a fun time shooting that show. It's hard to be angry when people are at least trying and having a good time.
And I think that's why so many people give Volume 6 a pass, is because that passion is clearly felt again. It feels like they're having a good time with it again. If passion and care is there and clearly felt, you can forgive a lot of misgivings. Like, it doesn't excuse the bad writing, but at least you get the impression that they were actually putting forth an effort.
And it's made even more apparent by the fact that we finally get 3 or 4 episodes away from fucking Junior. They are pretty much out of commission for a good chunk of this volume, and thank God for that, right? And look here, they're finally done with Ozpin's shit, especially since he hid this little tidbit.
Grimm are also attracted to this.
Wait, then how are there not Grimm swarming over Mistral trying to get that thing if it was a giant Grimm magnet? Oh, right, pocket dimension mechanics. Okay, but then why weren't Nevermore swarming the capital the minute the relic was out of the pocket dimension? It's not like there were any huntsmen around to stop them. Lionheart let them all die.
I'm giving this way more thought than the writers did. Let's keep going.
What's even weirder is that jumping around in the show's timeline actually works in the show's favor for once this volume. I mean, as far as the actual duration of the volume goes, it's very clearly only 3 or 4 days this is going on, and the ambiguity of when other storylines are occurring aren't really relevant to what's actually happening.
Seriously, this volume has handled things the best possible way they could have. 2 episodes in, and things are going terrifically. What could possibly go wrong?
Wonderful.
Oh no.
Episode 3 is infuriating because it is the long-awaited backstory as to why any of this is happening, and they took the worst possible direction with it. It shows that Ozpin's biggest crime in this series was dying, which is something he had no control over. The poor bastard's literally just a string of rope and a tug-of-war between his grieving wife and the gods. Ozpin essentially placed the burden of blame on his shoulders for something that ultimately wasn't his fault. He's a bystander in his own goddamn conflict. And I don't want to hear this, RWBY asked what he was hiding, not what he did.
What is Ozpin hiding from us?
What the fuck kind of question is that?
Do you honestly think they were going to use this scene as anything other than to show why they were trying to build Ozpin up as the man whose mistakes set upon the world the biggest disaster they faced since the Grimm War? Do you really think the wording of that question actually matters in this situation? So, I'm not saying you're wrong for saying that, but I don't in any good conscience think the wording here matters at all. They keep trying to push this whole shady Ozpin narrative, but they keep forgetting to have him actually do anything that would be even remotely shady. What happened to Salem wasn't his fault. He had no say in any of this. Hell, I can't even blame Salem in this, because her biggest crime was that she loved someone so much she wanted to do anything to bring him back. Her whole story is one of isolation. She finally had something good and it got taken away from her, and in her grief she pleaded to the deities, only to be denied and punished for it. Salem is a victim of circumstances. Why would she not want to take revenge against the gods? And when she gets Ozpin back only to find him as a tool for the gods, why would she not act out in rage against him? The conflict they were setting up, the war between Ozpin and Salem, the payoff reveal for all of that was in this episode, and if the intention of the writers was to cement the fact that Salem is the big evil here, then they failed spectacularly. Because now the gods are the main villains of the series. These two judgmental cunts who took out punishment on a woman who only wanted her husband back, and then just casually wiped out all of existence because of a small number of people that acted out against them. And yeah, gods are petty bitches, but placing the blame of this current global conflict on Ozpin and Salem when the entire reason for their war circles back to the gods are assholes is trying to solve a problem without identifying or acknowledging the cause.
And this is why organized religion needs to be abolished. Am I right, folks?
And it certainly doesn't help that they rushed the whole thing into 1 episode instead of 2 like they were initially going to.
We made the decision to combine it into 1 and do a lot of trimming out of a fear of, as we mentioned earlier, we were really afraid that people weren't going to enjoy this episode. It answers a lot of questions, but it also kind of brings our present-day storyline to a halt.
Of all the exposition dumps in this world you could have held back with, why the flying fuck would you pick the single most important plot point of the entire fucking show. If there was ever a moment where you were supposed to go all out with and give it everything you had, this was that moment. And you chose now, of all the times, to restrain yourselves? God, and if people thought I went crazy doing the reaction for this episode, that was nothing. Just look at what happened to a person who likes the show who watched this episode and went so far off the deep end he lost all sense of rational thought. This episode literally drove people insane. Fuck waterboarding, have this be the preferred torture technique at Gitmo. And ultimately, the plan is that there is no plan, and if that doesn't perfectly encapsulate the RWBY experience, I don't know what else does. Oh, and this moon reveal is terrible, not just because it was a complete bullshit way to silence 6 years of theory and speculation, but also because it is literally impossible to see a full moon during the daytime. Without a doubt in my mind, Episode 3 is the biggest disappointment of the entire volume. And that is saying something, because Cinder is revealed to still be alive. How devoid of ideas do you have to be to do the fake-out death for the same character twice? Like, okay, I didn't believe Cinder had died the first time, but come on. I mean, I know Cinder has a fan base, somehow, but at some point you're going to have to either actually do something with this villain and commit to it, or get rid of her for someone who's more compelling that can actually get the job done. And really, the only explanation as to why Cinder is even in this volume is, 1, so we can waste Luci Christian's time being in the show, and 2, so we can finally bring her back.
Neo?
Here's a crazy fun fact. So Neo wasn't originally planned to be in this volume. This was a decision that we kind of made. We felt as though it would really make Cinder's storyline a lot more interesting and also be able to set us up for some really cool stuff when Cinder gets to Atlas.
Now, I know I'm in the small minority when I say that Neo has never done anything for me as a character, but I have been astounded since the day Neo flew off into pre-World War I London to nanny some brats at how many people were wanting her to come back, despite her only contributions being untouchable by any combatant and a bunch of off-screen shenanigans. It goes to show that rule of cool/cute will make any character the most beloved, despite them literally not meaning a goddamn thing to the story. Now, don't get me wrong. This fight is fucking awesome. It may even be the best overall fight of the volume. Infinitely better than Cinder vs. Raven, which shouldn't be the case, but that's just the hand we were dealt. It's flashy, it's choreographed well, the music fits the scene, it uses the environment to its advantage. It does just about everything right to make it a proper, honest-to-God RWBY fight. However, this part makes me laugh. The idea that Cinder can threaten Neo and be taken at face value. Now, I know in context a maiden with superpowers would be threatening, but in RWBY logic, let's take a step back and analyze this. We have Cinder, who since getting her main powers has repeatedly gotten her ass handed to her on a silver platter when it mattered. And yes, I'm counting the Pyrrha fight as an ass-kicking because if you didn't see Pyrrha knocking Cinder around the room like a goddamn ragdoll, then we weren't watching the same fight. And the only reason Cinder won that fight was because her era literally defied the laws of reality. And she's threatening Neo, a character who has won every fight she's ever been a part of, and who has only ever been taken out of fights via Deus Ex Machina. No, okay, I get it now. So on from that stuff to probably the best mini-arc in the entire show. Brunswick Farms is a completely random and inconsequential part of the overall show, but there's just so much to it. The interpersonal drama, RWBY finally noticing that her uncle is a raging alcoholic and not making a joke out of it, showing there still being tension among certain members. You feel how tense the situation is. This is the closest we see RWBY actually beginning to despair and lose hope. The closest she's come to, actually changing as a character, which she hasn't done in 5 volumes at the least. And all of it culminates in the appearance of the scariest fucking Grimm in the entire franchise. Like, Jesus Christ almighty, what is wrong with these things? I don't know what it is about humanoid Grimm that give me the willies, but goddamn do they do a great job of it. The idea of a Grimm that essentially saps the will to live out of you, it makes you wonder why none of the other Grimm up to this point have done that. And the brilliance doesn't stop there. It finally acknowledges Silver Eyes as a viable weapon to combat the Grimm after 2 whole volumes of blatantly ignoring it completely. Like, this whole arc is just beautifully put together. It's just a relief to finally get an arc that isn't total donkey ass and actually makes you feel a modicum of tension for the main characters. It almost felt, dare I say, like actual good fucking writing.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last truly positive thing I have to say about Volume 6, because from here on to the end, it's basically a return to status quo.
And from here on to the end, we get into the reasons why Volume 6, while an improvement in many ways, is still incredibly flawed.
Yeah, they had us the first half, I'm not gonna lie.
Let's start with Maria Calavera. Now, in Volume 5, they mentioned that there was a major character that was supposed to be introduced that got cut.
We were going to introduce a character this volume, and this additional storyline this volume. Due to a number of reasons, we had to lose it. It's probably one of the hardest cuts we had to make.
And Volume 6, it was confirmed that it was Maria, although even without them telling me in the commentary, I knew she was the character they were talking about, because really, she's the only character introduced this volume that even comes close to matching that description.
Yeah, we talked about it in the Volume 5 commentary. Maria was the thing that we had to just take out of Volume 5 that we really wanted to have in.
Probably the funniest character to come out of here, that she is nonetheless the most inconsistent character of this volume. Now, Tom, what do you mean by that? Well, let me answer your question with another question. Why did Maria stay on the train to train Ruby and Silver Eyes? Okay, yes, that's the actual reason, but in-universe, why did she stay on the train? Because she knew about Ozpin? Nope, she didn't. They made that pretty apparent pretty quick. Because she knew Ruby had Silver Eyes. Nope, they went out of their way to make it as obvious as possible she was not aware of Ruby's eye color. So then why did she stay on the fucking train? Probability-wise, it was 100% safer for her to go with Junior and the rest of the passengers. Assume she ended up alone in that crash. What the fuck was she going to do? She's ancient, she's blind, she's got some form of scoliosis, she's likely wearing a diaper. She would be dead in 10 minutes. I mean, maybe she's ready to die, in which case, fine, but like, this is dumb. This is really, really dumb. And let's talk her semblance for a second. Her semblance allows her to have better reflexes and be able to see and counterattack before anything even happens. Now, if that were true, then she would have seen this coming. Get it? See it coming? Because she's blind? Oh, never mind. And I can already see the comments going, she couldn't see that because her aura depleted and she couldn't use her semblance. To which I reply, oh fuck, here we go again. Here we go again with that bullshit.
Oh god, I'm sorry, am I still here?
At this point, the definitions of aura and semblance and how they relate to each other have been written and rewritten to be completely different so many times that all I am left to do is throw up my hands and adopt the Giga approach.
Why, you ask? 'Cause why the fuck not?
So sure, whatever. But attacking the people whose jobs are to keep the population safe from the Grimm is a really, really dumb idea. Congratulations, you've made the world that much more dangerous. I know I've talked about the one or the other concept of the Grimm many times before, but severely crippling one of the greatest huntresses of all time so that she can't work anymore, that's like the opposite of what this culture should be promoting? I'm not crazy here, right? I mean, I know we can never trust the lore in this goddamn show, but this seems counterintuitive. Maria exists purely so that Ruby can finally start to give a shit about her goddamn Deus Ex Silver Eyes, and to be fair, she serves her purpose. By telling Ruby the key to being able to control her abilities, Silver Eyes takes one small step away from being a Deus Ex Machina and being an actual viable tool that could be used to save the world. This is a good thing. It does not excuse how Silver Eyes has been handled up to this point, i.e. not at all, but I can appreciate attempts being made. And Argus is a really pretty town that we actually get the chance to explore a little and take in the scenery and oh god, no, not you! Why? Why are you back? Things were going so well! Well, at least we get to meet his sister Saffron and her wife Tara and son Adrian, all of whom I take an immediate liking to. Not just because it's a healthy marriage and a show filled with some of the most unhealthy relationships I've ever seen, but also because Saffron is just a fun character and made an incredibly wonderful first impression by shitting all over Jaune as he rightly deserves. Why did Jaune hug Blake here? They have shared exactly 0 scenes together or lines to each other. They don't honestly expect us to buy into this shit, right? Okay, I know, I'm already on my bullshit, but is it really any wonder? Is it any wonder that the minute Team Junior re-enters the story, things immediately start going back to the storytelling qualities of past volumes? Is it any wonder that I have known Jaune's sister all of 27 seconds and I already wish she would take Jaune's place in the show? Brunswick Farms is universally acknowledged to be the best arc to come out of Volume 6, maybe even the whole show, and it had nothing whatsoever to do with Jaune, Ren, or Nora. It's almost like having the arc center on the 4 girls for whom the show is named after and actually giving a shit writing it actually makes it more well received. Who'da thunk? All Team Junior does is weigh the story down. And this is not just a Jaune thing anymore. I am tired of all three of them. Ren has developed into little more than an exposition machine who is around only to give out-of-place speeches and contradictory information. And listen, I love Samantha Ireland more than 90% of the people on this planet. I am sick and fucking tired of Nora's shtick. I'm sorry, I hung in there as long as I could, but we have long passed the point where Nora's wackiness was endearing to me. And if you're at all curious, it was right around here that it stopped. I don't know what else to say on that. I feel like if the creators haven't realized at this point that Team Junior is a manacle holding the characters in the story back, then they're never going to realize it. I mean, they gave them the perfect out this volume to get them out of the story like they did with Sun and Ilya earlier, and they didn't fucking take it. It's like the writers are telling the audience, you're stuck with them, deal with it. I am ready for Team Junior to go away. The story can easily be rewritten to accommodate them not being in the story. Give Team RWBY actual things to do that are actually important that you normally give to these three idiots. I mean, here we are on this nice night and we're stuck with Jaune of all people and...
Okay. This is really how you want to handle this, huh? Like this? Alright.
You know, we had so many people that were like, oh, there needs to be a whole arc where Jaune visits the family and all this stuff. And it's like, and again, we would love to do stuff like that, but there's just almost only so much screen time, too. You know?
A big thing people wanted was to have Jaune encounter Pierre's parents and tell them the news of their daughter's death. For 2 volumes, this has been a big cloud hanging over Jaune's head from the audience wanting some kind of reconciliation on that. And what they came up with was both hilariously brilliant and hilariously garbage simultaneously. Which is impressive. I salute thee. This was your moment to really bring that emotional baggage home, and you blew your emotional moment because I'm laughing. It's just so fucking overkill. The idea that Pierre mattered so much to the concept of Mistral that they erected a statue in her honor. Do you think that when we get to Atlas, they'll have a giant statue of Penny erected? Do you think Shade Academy has statues of Team Bronze because according to the copybook, they're all fucking dead? And this ties back to a question I asked in my Volume 4 review. What exactly does the world of Remnant think happened to Pierre and Nikos? How do they think she died? The only person who saw what happened to her that night was RWBY, who was unconscious 15 seconds later, and who, so far as I know, didn't go on Lisa Lavender's program to present her tale, and even if she did, it wouldn't fucking matter because the fucking towers are still down. How do they know she died as a hero instead of being crushed under rubble or inside the belly of a Grimm? Hell, the last time anyone in the world saw her at all was when she murdered someone on live television broadcasted across the entire planet. So why would they perceive her as a hero and not a murderer? There shouldn't be a statue of her. Her name should have been dragged through the mud. So who spread that information of her heroic sacrifice if one person was unconscious and the other one went months not being able to speak above a croak? Now don't misunderstand me. I don't knock the people who found this scene impactful. I don't blame a single person for getting emotional over this scene, especially when they turned Jaune and Pierre's motif, which was always one of my favorite musical themes, into an actual song that I unfortunately found to be very disappointing once the full version was released. I can 100% see why people would love this scene, but for me it's a dud. But this was still an important scene for me, and I'll come back to why before this video is over. So now is a good time to bring this up, that a large part of this volume is spent addressing things that they should have addressed earlier. Silver Eyes, Pierre's parents' feelings on their daughter's death, Crow's drinking, Sun's teammates, the shady side of Mistral, Neo's return, etc., etc. And the problem with it is that they crammed everything that should have been spread out over the entire Mistral arc into this one volume, when they could have used Volume 4 to address some of those aspects, and they could have used Volume 5 to do literally anything that wasn't sitting around in a house for 2 full hours real time. And it's because of this that there are times where Volume 6 feels like little more than the writer's checklist. Like they're trying to figure out what they still need to get done while they've got one foot out the door of Mistral and their hand on the light switch. So the efforts this volume are a double-edged sword. At least they remembered to finally do them, but also, why did it take so long when you spent so much time previously doing less than nothing? So Oscar was completely wasted as a character this volume. And really, he's been a wasted character since the day he was awkwardly and haphazardly brought into the show. Everything about this character has been poorly handled from the word go, and now we have him basically resolving his arc off-screen because he wasn't important enough to have it one on-screen. You know his introduction in Volume 4 was out of nowhere and stupid, but at least it came with the hope that maybe he will start making more sense. But as the volumes go on, this character's presence makes less and less sense. He doesn't need to be in this fucking story. Nobody wants him here. His entire purpose is literally be the mecha for Ozpin the pilot. He is the Unit 1 to Ozpin's Shinji, except without all the symbolism and thematic elements and psychological brain damage that made that character work. Here is where it is most obvious that Oscar doesn't matter. This should have been Oscar's arc, but it is handled off-screen. Completely off-screen. Like, we don't even see any inner conflict with him while he's just wandering around town. Like, how do you value a character that little when his entire role is being a vessel for the oldest man in the world and the catalyst for everything? Oscar should be the most important fucking character in the show given what he is, but there is never a point where he doesn't feel like baggage. And of course Sean comes up with a plan to get to Atlas, and of course it's the stupidest fucking plan of all time, and this time even the characters recognize it. I mean, they couldn't get back in contact with that ship captain again? Surely there was a better workaround for this. But no, all the kids are on board with infiltrating a military compound and stealing a goddamn airship.
I wonder if this is one of those teenage rebellion kind of things. You know, like one of those, like, fuck the man kind of things, you know?
I'm gonna ask this so that the fans will stop asking it. Yo, that baby got a semblance, or is that just comedic effect crying, Carrie?
No comment. I just assumed it was a comedy thing.
Why not? Like, you're leaving Mistral. You have no reason to ever revisit these characters ever again. So why not just let the baby's superpower be super crying and call it a day? Christ, it's the fucking shady man problem all over again. Just let the fucking crying be the semblance and move on with your life. So from here, the next 3 episodes split 2 ways. I'm going to cover the mech side first because the other half is so dense it could honestly make its own video with how much there is to cover with it. And the mech fight is pretty straightforward in its quality. Now, earlier I said that the mech fight was the only fight that I would consider to be truly bad. And from what I have gathered, the general consensus is that it was the low point of the volume. Not only is the fight mostly boring to watch, the mech itself has one of the most boring designs ever that makes it look like it came right out of Pacific Rim. And to top it all off, the fight is against a character who is impossible to take as a serious threat because of how she's been presented up till now. It's obvious that she's the black sheep of the Atlas military, or she wouldn't be stuck here with the poorest excuse for guards I've ever seen. And also, didn't Ironwood, recall all of Atlas's soldiers and close the border?
General Ironwood closed the borders and recalled all of his little troops and tin cans.
So what exactly is the point of keeping this outpost here? Just to keep Cordovan out? How many times do you think Ironwood suggested she just retire, but it was too subtle and went over her head, so he just stuck her here instead? I'd buy that. Anyway, yeah, the fight's bad, the song they give it is bad, RWBY and Oscar combined to take away the sole thing that was keeping Jaune relevant to the story, and thus rendering him totally useless, which is par for the course. And the way RWBY goes about solving the Cordovan thing is absolutely atrocious. Now, if you recall at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that RWBY had a lot of focus put on her, and I mentioned the ways in which that was handled well. Now I'm going to talk about the ways in which it was handled poorly, and that was by relegating RWBY to being the speech girl. Specifically, the girl who gives the same fucking speech on at least 3 separate occasions. Possibly more, I honestly can't tell, they all blend together after a while. It's no secret, RWBY is miles and miles behind the rest of the cast when it comes to evolving as a character. Which is what made Brunswick Farms so great for her, because it's the first time we see her almost lose hope entirely, which is good. Her character needs those kinds of moral dilemmas. The peppy, overly optimistic personality only stretches so far because everything she has seen should have gone a long way to warping her perception of the world. But they haven't. A good character should not be a straight line, but rather have peaks and valleys that they go through that changes them, either for the better or for the worse. And if the character reaches the end of the story exactly the same as she was when she started, not affected by anything that happened to her, then the writer has failed their protagonist. And this speech just... I'm sorry, but does anybody buy that whole "we faced bigger threats than you and succeeded" bullshit? The power scaling in this show is so fucked, and the villains have been defeated at almost every single turn, and there have been so goddamn many unearned victories that I can't take this line seriously. Succeeded over bigger threats? You won last volume purely through the bad guys being more incompetent than you are. That is not something to be proud of, especially since Cordovan is just as big a fucking idiot as you are. Just, ugh. So yeah, that was terrible. So let's just forget about that and move on to the main course, the thing that I am fairly certain is the thing that just about everyone who clicked on this video wants to hear about. Strap in, folks, this one's gonna be a doozy.
Hold on to your butts.
Now, what you are about to hear is my unedited reaction to Adam's return despite him not doing a goddamn thing all season.
No, wait.
What part of
hold on.
Legendary Hunters do you know?
Wait, what's going on? What? Blake, what happened?
Oh, the scene. Here it comes. You got it ready?
What?
Yeah, I got it.
Good.
Wait, she got sniped? Wait, what's going... Oh, bullshit!
That is the most genuine reaction I've ever.
So, I have a question. Early in the volume, Blake and Yang separately both saw Adam over the course of their adventure, and both were played off that they were hallucinating Adam because of their shared trauma of him. But now we get here, and it turns out Adam is real, and he was actually there. But kind of? Like, this train scene is real, but this scene here isn't? But they're both presented as hallucinations? So what's supposed to be the difference? The fact that he's wearing his mask in this scene, but not on the train? Because in this show that's laden with animation errors and characters teleporting at the wazoo, we can trust that? Like, both scenes do the exact same fucking thing, so why am I supposed to believe one is real and the other isn't? What the fuck? You're playing mind games with me! Now, the fight scenes that happen next, both between Blake and Adam and the three-way fight of Blake, Yang, and Adam, aren't bad at all. I mean, there's some technical shit you can point out, and you're right that there are some camera issues, but the way the fight moves and the way the characters go at it, it's still far better than the majority of the fight scenes we got in prior 3 volumes. Probably because we lifted from Monty's bootlegged Adam and Yang fight that was supposed to have been in Volume 3, but I digress. Also, this bike thing amuses me to no end. How could this happen to me? The single greatest problem with this fight is not the fight itself, but Yang's part in it. As we've stated before, Yang's road to recovery was one of the better-handled parts of the show, at least in Volume 4. Volume 5 had started to wane a bit in favor of the usual shtick, but it was still present on some scale. Here, in the moment where it should matter the most, however, it's just gone. Like it was never there. And I don't want to hear the whole, she's matured, she's learned how to get over it, she's stronger. That's not how that works, guys! Especially in this high-stress, high-intensity moment, Yang should be at her worst right about now. She should barely be functioning at all. There's a book out there called The Body Keeps the Score that focuses on the human body and mind dealing with trauma, that explains all of this better than I ever could. But when the brain's alert system kicks in, it triggers escape plans in the oldest parts of the brain, which takes over the conscious mind and locks the person in fight, flight, or freeze. Which she is at least in fight mode, but doing these fancy parries and flips and thinking her plans through are not aspects that associate with that. She should have barely been able to hold her own. I'm not saying she couldn't have still won in the end, but this just feels like an insult. You can absolutely overcome your trauma with time, hard work, a shit ton of therapy, and a healthy amount of medications, but not like this! And I know people want Yang to rise up like in the song, but what's more important, do you think? An abrupt girl power moment? Or taking what is arguably the best character arc to come out of this whole mess that was the Mistral Arc and not doing justice with it? And thus we come to the death of Adam Taurus, and good fuckity lord, were people in a tizzy over this one. For this next segment, I'm going to be taking a look at these 2 videos. Now, before I start, I should make it clear that I hold no personal quarrel with either of these 2 gentlemen. I have no vendetta against them, nor do I think ill on them or their content as a whole. But I'm going to tear these videos apart anyway because I have a real issue with the message they're putting out. Mainly they're placing Adam on a pedestal and his overall effect on the story. Seriously, people lost it when he died, talking about the loss of a great villain and a cool character, and I, for the life of me, can't understand where they're coming from with this. Because no matter what character trailer they put out or what bullshit hype they try to raise, we all saw the end of Volume 5, right? Remember when this happened? See, that was the moment Adam was really killed as a character, and up until this finale came along, I was under the impression that everyone else was already aware of that. People are talking about how Adam was this great villain, this terrorist leader fighting for the noble cause with a threatening presence, and I'm just like, bitch, where? The Adam you're talking about never made it into the fucking show. The closest we ever got to that Adam was this scene in Volume 3, and this scene canonically takes place before the first fucking episode of the actual show. Maybe that was the original intention, and maybe we would have gotten that Adam if the creator hadn't been killed by his fucking cat, but ultimately the one we got was the pedophile, and that's the one we had to deal with for the last 4 volumes. So trying to paint Adam out like we just spent the last 6 years with this really complex character is just wrong. It's no secret that Adam has never exactly been in my top 10 list, or my top 20, or even my top 50. From the bad voice acting, to the upstaging Blake in her own goddamn trailer, to the arm slicing and creepy pedo-ness, to being a whiny man baby, Rooster Teeth went out of its way to make sure I hated this character and everything about him. But even back then, I had to admit that with the little bit we got on him in the Black trailer, Adam had the potential to be a terrific anti-hero kind of character who does bad things for a good cause. But that idea died when he sliced off Yank's arm and got all creepy with Blake, and the idea of him being any kind of worthwhile character died when Blake haymakered him into the ground. And no last-minute character short was going to change that. And if you're one of the fools who are suckered into believing that, then I've got some prime real estate on the dark side of the moon I'd like to sell to you. And I'm gonna try to talk about Bumbleby as little as possible because I don't fucking care. This whole drama surrounding it means nothing to me whatsoever. I don't think this is the best ship, nor do I think it's the thing that's gonna kill the show. People get so damn mad about this, and it's so the farthest thing to be yelling about when blatant rules of storytelling get broken without consequence all the fucking time. Is this pairing well written? Absolutely not, but neither is any other shipbait pairing in this godforsaken show, so I don't know why I have to take it out on them over all the others. Rooster Teeth has a bad habit of using shipbaiting as a smokescreen for the real issues. Like, they know their writing is terrible, so they throw shit like this out to take people's minds off it. Shipping in this show is so pointless. Every character interaction just feels so hollow. There are points with no connecting thread. But that's not specifically a Bumblebee problem. They may be the face of the shipping, but they are not the sole cause, and to place blame solely on them for the writers' obsession with shipping is as irresponsible as the writers themselves are. So let's get past everyone's neurosis and actually talk about what's happening in this scene. Blake and Yang kill Adam. Thematically, it makes sense. Who else was going to do it? RWBY? Weiss? They've never shared a scene with him. I'm not sure if they're aware of his existence. In a world where the Faunus arc was competently written, having Weiss struggling to deal with killing someone her family's company basically caused would be really good storytelling. But we don't live in that world, and in the world we live in, Blake and Yang are the only 2 players on the board for whom Adam's existence matters. The power scaling is fucked, but again, that's a RWBY problem in general. Power levels are bullshit. And then there's this line which makes me laugh.
3. The fact that not only do these 2 teenagers show no remorse or hesitation for killing someone.
The heroes, everybody! They're the protagonists! They just fucking murdered someone.
Yeah, the girls are supposed to be good! They don't cause death! Except for, you know, that time when their actions got multiple civilians murdered on a freeway by a giant mech, and then never mentioned it ever again. Or that time where they collapsed the tunnel and killed a bunch of White Fang members, most of whom had probably only been with the organization for like a day. Team RWBY are kind of a bunch of sociopaths. I don't know how people haven't caught on to that by now. But regardless, there is one point brought up in both of these videos that I can agree with. And that is that to still expect anything of these villains is a waste of your time. The villains have had one significant victory in 6 years, and even that victory is questionable under the circumstances. Even in this very volume, Salem's organization is a non-entity to anything else that is going on. Which, paradoxically, is one of the reasons why this volume works as well as it does. And as I say that sentence, do you see the big problem? Volume 6 worked because it had to deal with obstacles and character tension and grim and creepy ex-boyfriends and the overlaying problem of how they were going to get to Atlas. And Salem, Cinder, and the rest of their unmarried lot had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. The story only seems to work at this point when the villains are not involved in any way. That is not a good thing. So yeah, Adam could have been the exception that proved the rule, but it's hard to be that when the characters never commit to the character. Because if you look back at the entire series, Adam was pretty much an off-screen villain from the word go. Why Adam is in the story is ultimately beyond me, because really, on-screen, what has he done? Killed his boss, he sliced off a girl's arm, and that's it. This character short was meant to show off Adam's character and history, which never had any form of impact on the show itself or its characters, including the character the short is about. The fact of the matter is this: Adam Taurus was dead on arrival. Blake and Yang didn't kill him, they took him off the fucking life support. This wasn't an act of murder, this was a mercy killing. A way of getting Adam the hell out of this show before they could fuck his character up even worse than they already had. And the sooner you can accept that, the sooner you can begin to heal from your disappointment. Now that that's out of the way, okay, you know what? No, we do need to talk more about the Bumbleby thing. And before you take the flamethrowers out, I swear I'm going to look at this as unbiased as possible. I swear to God. I don't get angry at Bumbleby, or the shipping in general. I really don't. I don't see a point in getting angry about it. I know I've talked about this in the past, and my stance on it has always been, ship what you want, but don't bother getting angry at it because there's no point. And I still stand by that. But apparently I need to make an addendum. Now, when I made that speech in the Volume 4 review, I thought this was an unspoken agreement that didn't need to be spelled out. But I realized in the intervening years that when it comes to the internet, if you don't spell it out in explicit wording, then it just flies over everyone's heads because they can't take the, well, obviously, away from the sentiment. So here it is, folks. It is fine to ship what you want, and there is no problem with fans having pairings. But when the writers prioritize shipping over making any sort of narrative sense or do it in a way that doesn't feel natural to what's going on in the actual story, all in an attempt to please their fan base, that is when you have a problem. Now, the Volume 5 finale did not leave a whole lot of room to recover from how they fumbled the Blake and Yang reunion. Regardless on if they said there'd be more tension later on, that was the note they decided to leave it on for 8 months before we got to see any of the conflict that would have made this more interesting. So given what they were left to work with, I think the scenes between Yang and Blake this volume work? And I put a question mark after work because it works in the framework of this volume, not really for the whole series. Because before this, Blake and Yang really only had 3 instances where they had any meaningful interactions between them. And any other interaction was through group shots where they barely interacted. It all comes down to time management, which is something I have been complaining about since volume fucking 1, and 6 years later it's just as big a problem as it was back then. Because they forced themselves into this time limit of having a certain amount of episodes with a certain amount of time per episode, and they're all incredibly restricting. And they want to tell this big story with this huge ensemble cast, and the time constraints just don't work for the story they want to tell. A story is like a fine wine. It needs room to breathe. And I know, I keep harping on this, but if you're not allowing your story to flow naturally, not allowing your characters to mature and interact and grow in a natural way that makes sense, not allowing conflicts to play out in a way that leaves your audience feeling like they gained something from the experience, be it emotionally or even philosophically, then you're not allowing yourselves to tell the story the way it needs to be told in order for the best possible story to be told. So when people say Bumblebee feels rushed or they didn't build it up enough, it's because the writers didn't allow that relationship to breathe and grow in a way that felt natural to the story, and the audience felt that rushed nature. Storytelling is in itself an art, and there is a rhyme or reason to how a story is told. And why I always get frustrated is because the way RWBY is told is so haphazardly thrown together in a way that doesn't flow narratively and doesn't tell the best possible story, and they still can't do that 6 years in, and that is still lacking. Also, I don't know if Bumblebee was planned from the beginning or not. That's not in my crystal ball. If it was, great. But it seems to me that they were incredibly schizophrenic with what kind of romantic entanglement they wanted to pursue with Blake. This isn't even a love triangle situation. Blake legitimately has her own fucking harem in this show. I'm not saying that Miles is projecting some kind of unresolved feelings onto the character his ex voices, but I will say that I think he would feel better if he talked to someone about it. And as to appeasing the fans, I mean, I get wanting to keep the fans happy with your work, but at the end of the day, it's your story to tell, and their job is simply to absorb it best they can. The audience should not be dictating what happens in your story, and I know in this day and age, the audience likes to feel that personal connection with the writer and their work, and that their headcanons will shape the way the story goes, but... And please, audience, don't take this as an insult. That's not your job. That's not your concern. Your job is to let the writer tell his story. And if Bumbleby was planned from the start, great, fantastic. But if it wasn't, or if you rushed it in a mad attempt to keep fans from losing interest, then you've compromised your story just to keep fans happy, meaning you did not have faith enough in your own storytelling. The writer's job is to tell the story, the audience's job is to absorb and be enthralled by the story, and the critic's job is to tell you if it worked or not and what could have been done differently. And while that may sound hypocritical, understand that I can't force Miles and Carrie to write better. That is beyond my power. I can only advise them, sometimes kindly, sometimes after a bottle of whiskey and the police getting called on me as I wander around my yard and in my underwear screaming at the sky, but whether or not they listen and take that into consideration is beyond my control.
So for those of you who have accused me of demanding to be heard by them, you are giving me far more credit than I give myself.
Whew! Alright. Now that all that is out of the way, what is the tier list for Grimm? That's something I genuinely want to know coming out of this volume. Like, we know Grimm age, but what is the threat level? Because we see hordes of certain type of Grimm, but then we get Grimm like the Wyvern, the Knuckleavy, and now the Leviathan. Are these three supposed to be considered, like, legendary Grimm compared to the others? What about the Apathy? Where do they fit on the list? I know I'm probably thinking more about this than is necessary, but it's something I genuinely want to learn. So the Grimm are about to swarm Argus, and it's honestly looking like another anticlimactic Volume 2 breach fight when RWBY decides to silverize the fuck out of the thing, leading to... fuck. Probably the best single scene in the entire volume. Like, okay, I know there are likely things wrong with the scene, like how RWBY manages to master Silverize the very next time she uses it, or how Cordovan basically turns a blind eye to the group, literally breaking the law for no reason, or that we're essentially leaving Argus to possibly die at the hands of thousands of Grimm. But just... this scene works for me, okay? The framing of shots, the use of Jin, the slow-mo and speed-up, the gorgeous hand-painted stills used in the flashback, RWBY's almost failure at remembering all the tragic moments, and her success while remembering the good ones. The song that, while I don't think it really works well on its own, and works incredibly well for this moment. And to top it all off, we finally get a real look at Summer Rose, which makes little to no sense because RWBY never fucking talks about her mother ever, but who fucking cares? At the end of the day, we have left Anima behind to whatever fate it will meet. The end of a tumultuous 3-year arc that was filled with a few really good ups and a plethora of absolutely deplorable downs. To say that the Mistral Arc was an overall disaster would be putting it mildly, and if I had had my say in the writing process, none of it would have gone down the way it did, especially not Volume 5. But this is the legacy we have now left, and history will remember it for what it was, not for what it could have been. But now we have a new continent with new dynamics to explore, I say in dismay, knowing full well we're going to have to suffer through Weiss's family again. But that, of course, is for another day. For another critic. But first, so that was Volume 6, all wrapped up. Like I said at the top of the video, this was hands down the best written volume of the show, and the fight animation was as close as a return to form as we're likely to get in the post-Monty era. And it had the single best mini-arc to ever come out of RWBY. That being said, the course correction of past mistakes to the point that they tended to overshadow the present, as well as the god-awful Ozpin and Salem reveal, really bog it down. And the fact that it had a weak third act is the main reason why I can't give it the A that it could have rightly earned. Put it in the B minus range, I guess. I know there were things I didn't talk about. I hardly talked about Jin or Little Miss Malachite, but really, what was to say? They wasted 2 of the best actresses in the industry on bit roles, and I can't even get angry about it anymore. I know I didn't really talk about Mercury and his daddy issues, but aside from that, his dad is all for one, it didn't really connect enough with me. And really, that character was quite literally dead on arrival, so who cares anyway? Mercury and Emerald are pretty much nothing characters anyway, so again, who cares? I know I didn't talk about Salem or her team at all, but what the fuck was I going to talk about there? Hazel is best uncle who takes responsibility when he shouldn't have to. Tyrion getting his stinger back is a possible foreshadow to Nora dying if you know your mythology. Dr. Chucklefuck was... chuckle fucking? I don't know. Watts never gets to do anything. Salem's Screech somehow managed to out-stupid the inflatable bullshit they pulled last volume. Don't ask me how. I could talk about how Cinder and Neo are going to the Arctic region dressed like $20 whores, but really that's just a distraction for how they're probably going to likely fail again, because the stakes have gotten so fucking small they're practically non-existent with these villains. Volume 6 was a good story for its volume. It was not a good story to make up for the rest of the show. The problems that have existed since the beginning are still there. They've just been mitigated by last-minute panicky course correction. But as I said at the top, only a fool would look at this volume and not see a marked improvement. Yeah, they dipped in the second half, but it was still a far better sight than Volume 5 because at least the characters were proactive, even if there was a lot of stupid involved. But Volume 6 has proved that, hey, they're at least starting to listen to criticism more. If they take what they've learned from this arc and apply it going forward, I don't know if RWBY could necessarily be saved. Frankly, I think that ship has long since left the harbor, but they can at least finish the last couple years left in this show on a higher note.
But, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, this is my last stop. This is the last volume I will be covering, and it is the last volume that I plan to watch. RWBY will be going forward from here on in without me. I am far from the first critic to say they're dropping the show, and I imagine I won't be the last. But if you've been following me this long, you at least deserve to know why.
It's not how this volume was handled. It's not the reveal of the gods in Salem, or of Cinder and Neo, or even of Toon Jr. or Oscar. It's not Cordova, it's not Maria. It's not even Adam or anything involving Bumbleby. Not the animation of the soundtrack, or even all the bad writing tropes. No, I'm dropping RWBY because I realized halfway through this volume that I no longer cared about anything that was happening in the show. And that's the biggest problem of all. I don't care if they succeed, and I don't care if they fail. I just feel an overall sense of nothingness towards the show, even with the shit they get right. And when you don't care, when you don't feel anything at all except tired, that is the true moment when you know it's time to walk away. Volume 6 was an improvement, but it wasn't enough. At this point, it was too little, too late.
And if I can just be brutally, painfully honest for a moment, I really don't like what this volume did to people.
Like, okay, there was tension from the beginning, and there was ship discussions from the beginning. I was there. I saw them. And true, they have gotten steadily more vocal over the years, especially after Monty died and it became a divide between the people who wanted to protect his vision and the people who thought Artie was doing his dream dirty. But Volume 6 did something to people. Volume 6 changed people. I noticed it first with Episode 3 and how everyone got all heated around that episode, and it got even worse come end of the volume. Suddenly, the fans on both sides just went rabid, and the people who could once have perfectly intelligible conversations suddenly seemed to just lose every ounce of sanity they had. For as much of a mess as Volume 5 was, I weirdly felt like it brought everyone closer together, like we were all pretty united in recognizing the volume as a disaster. Volume 6 did the complete opposite. It widened the divide so much that it feels less like a line and more like tectonic plate shifting and pushing whole sections of continent away from each other. This volume, more than any other, didn't so much as drive a wedge between fans and critics so much as it used 3 metric tons of dynamite to blow a massive gorge between them. I've seen things get ugly before, but oh my dear God. It seems like everyone on both sides of the issue have either lost their minds to bitterness and rage or just straight up lost their fucking minds.
And I think in the end, that is the single greatest problem with Volume 6, is that it was just enough of an improvement that it caused everyone to lose all sense of perspective.
I can't deal with that level of madness that has been happening post-Volume 6, and it's making me incredibly wary of even the people I work the closest with. And don't get me wrong, there are people in this reviewer community that I genuinely like and enjoy talking to. And then there are people in this reviewer community that I will be content to never see their face ever again for the rest of my days. Between the infighting of reviewers, the fans threatening people over every little thing, everyone going fucking Looney Tunes over the Vic Mignogna situation, the Glassdoor reviews, and the incoming author whose books are questionable at best, I cannot think of a better time to pack bags and get as far the fuck away from this show and its fandom as humanly possible. And honestly, I suggest you all do the same, because it's not going to get any better. Let's face it, people. This is not worth it. No piece of media on this planet is worth the level of hostility I've seen over this show. But with the passing of Volume 6, it is becoming more and more clear that the general attitude of those who watch RWBY is not no one wants to admit the show isn't good, but rather no one cares that the show isn't good. And while it is fun to kick your ex's new bow into exposed wiring, clearly we are not all on the same page here. When both the crewbie and the fans are content to just get by instead of succeed, that's when I know I've done all I can. There is nothing left for me to do here. It's a shame, you know. RWBY helped pull me out of one of the worst depressions of my life back in 2013. And I suppose it was that debt that made me stick with it as long as I did. Hell, hearing Monty talk and just being in his presence at RTX 2014 was what finally convinced me to get off my ass and start the Red vs. Blue retrospectives.
Which I'm still doing, by the way. Don't worry about that. I'm not dropping that. RVB 13 Part 2 is still a go. So calm down. No worries. Things are still looking good.
It was a show that I fell hard for and wanted to see where it went, regardless of its failings, regardless of the inconsistencies or the lack of basic storytelling, and even past the tragic death of its creator. I guess I wanted RWBY to be a success because that's how the story should end. After the death of the man who tried to bring his vision to life, his friends and compatriots were to band together and bring the story above and beyond to make it the best possible tale to spin and silence all the doubters who joked about its status as an anime and whether or not Rooster Teeth could pull off an original animation. Well, they certainly went ahead and did that, if only because the jokes are now more tragic than they are funny. I don't know if this is what Monty would have wanted. I don't know if this was his plan or not. I don't have that level of foresight. But I know I just don't have it in me anymore to watch something that once filled me with so much joy continue to flop around like a Magikarp out of water, trying desperately to learn how to write a coherent story. Years from now, when the show is over and everyone has calmed down and nobody cares anymore, I'd be willing to go back and do a retrospective of it from beginning to end. As to whether I would watch the show in my own time without reviewing it, as of this recording, I can safely say no, I have no desire to do that. That may change. There's a line in the second Song of Ice and Fire book that I've always liked that says, "When we speak of tomorrow, who's to say what's for certain?" And Lord knows my friend Chad could use a venting buddy with the show, which I'm always happy to be. But for now, I'm just tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of the show. I'm tired of the writers and directors who don't know what they're doing and don't seem to care to learn. I'm tired of the voice actresses actively warning people away from watching their show. I'm tired of everyone playing tug of war with a dead man's corpse over what he would have wanted and what he wouldn't have. I'm tired of the shippers losing their minds over every little thing. I'm tired of the other critics. I'm tired of the fan base, both positive and negative. I'm tired of the psycho diehard fans that would sort of put your head on a spike for every little bad thing you say. I'm tired. And I am more than ready to finally put the show to bed and call it a day.
And yeah, this is how my time with RWBY ends. At least for now. But until next time, on whatever project I decide to take on next, I am and always have been your faithful YouTuber Tom, and I will see you guys next time.